This video is going to be about setting up a wish list. So a wish list is going to be the way you're going to gather your students' preferences for an upcoming rotation. So if you want to know, what sites and settings your students are interested in, you're going to use a wish list to find that out from them. And there's a couple of ways you can do that. The standard way most schools are going to want to do is that they're going to want to share the slots that they've already received from their sites. So they've sent out a request to their sites and said, could you take any students? And then they're going to share what their sites have said. This site has said they could take 2 inpatient acute students. This other site said they could take 3 outpatient ortho students. And you're going to share that list with your students and let them choose what they're interested in. So that's kind of how most of the wish lists are going to function. Some other schools will do something called a reverse wish list, and we'll talk about that on another video. The setup is going to be pretty similar, but we're just going to show you the steps of how to go in and set up that standard wish list. So you're going to go to placements by session, and here you have your list of sessions. Remember, if it's not one of your favorites that's showing here, you're just going to want to remove that favorite only filter. That way you can find your session that you want to create a wish list for. You're going to go ahead and go in here to session setup, and that's going to be where you'll go ahead and create the parameters for that wish list. You're going to go here on your right menu to session wish list round. And the reason we call it a round is that you might need to create multiple rounds of wish lists. So a lot of schools will just have one, and that's totally fine, but let's say it's the first time you've ever done this and you have a lot of students who don't realize that they need to submit their wish list on time, and maybe 5 students miss the deadline. Now, we don't want to, totally leave those students out in the cold, but we are going to penalize them for not turning in their wish list on time. So in that case, we might match all of our students from their first round wish list, the students who did get it on time, and then we might create a second round for those stragglers who missed the deadline, and then they can choose from what's left over after we've placed the other students. So keep that in mind. Also, if you find some students were not able to get a placement on their wish list for whatever reason, you could also create a second round for them. So when you're ready to add that round, you're going to come here and click Add Round. And then this pop-up is going to load, and you're just going to want to label that round. So the students will see that name. So, if you want to say Level 1A Wish List Round 1 or something like that. Then here you're going to choose the minimum number of slots that the students have to select on their wish list. So they have to choose at least this many spots. So we're going to say maybe 3. A typical one might be like 5 or something like that, just kind of varies based on your program. And then the maximum number of spots here, so they can choose up to this many. Keep in mind for both of these, this is really about setting your students' expectations. So if a student has, only 5 slots on their wish list and they get their 5th choice, they might feel like, that wasn't really that good. I got my last choice on my wish list. I'm really kind of sad about that. However, if you force the student to select 10 and rank 10 slots and they get their 5th choice on the wish list, they might think, hey, that's pretty good. It was in the top half of my choices. So just keep that in mind. Also, if your program has some sites that are extremely popular, I've run across that sometimes, where a school has a site that 90% of their students put it as their first or second choice, but they only got like 3 slots from that site. Well, your students don't have a very good, likelihood of all of them getting that placement. So if you're a school like that, it's much better for you to have your students rank more spots, because then they really have a better chance of feeling like they got something that was decently high up on their wish list. Right? And then here you'll want to put in the wish list start date. It will also prompt you to put in a time. So at this start date and time, my wish list is going to automatically open. I'm not going to have to do anything to get it to open for my students. It'll be open right away at this date and time here. Then we have to choose the wish list end date, and again, that has an end time as well. So you're going to want to give your students however long you think is reasonable to complete the wish list. A week can be pretty typical. Some schools might only give a couple of days, just kind of up to you, whatever that length of time is. And then you are again going to want to choose that time. So keep in mind this will automatically close, and really be sure to communicate that to your students. This is not waiting for me to turn it off. It will automatically close at this date and time, and you will not be able to get in to submit your wish list. So keep that in mind and keep communicating that to them. The wish list view date, some schools like to allow their students to see what's available on the wish list before they actually start working on it. So they might give them like 3 weeks to look at the wish list and then only like 2 days to complete it. So you can start giving them the opportunity to see what slots are available. I've even run across a couple of schools that make the view date right after they send out the slot request because they want their students to see what's coming in as it's coming in. I think one school told me that they liked that the students knew how hard they had to work to get those slots, so they never felt like, any slot was a disappointment, that every placement was a good placement. So just something to keep in mind if you want to make that due date or that view date sooner than the start date, you are able to do that. If you don't need your students to start looking at it earlier, you can make it exactly the same as the start date. That's totally fine too. Include slots with status. For a standard wish list, you're pretty much only going to want to include confirmed slots, actual slots that your sites have said they could definitely take a student. Then you have some additional options here. If you're a school that uses required clinicals, meaning like you have a requirement that you set up in your configuration, like every student has to complete one inpatient and one outpatient rotation, or one out of area rotation or something like that, you'll just want to turn this on, and that means your students will be able to see what requirements they still need to complete, just as a reminder when they're completing their wish list. Allow rank after submit wish list. So when your students are done with their wish list, they will submit it. At that point, it's a little bit locked for them. They can't go in and, make changes or, select different sites or anything like that. However, if we turn this option on, my students could decide up until the due date to change the order of items on their wish list. So if all of a sudden a student says, you know what, my second choice should really be my first choice, I just want to move them around, you don't have to go in and unsubmit that wish list for them. You can turn this on and then they're able to just move things around up until the end date. Allow resume edit after submit. That one's a little bit complicated. If you have slots that are on this wish list that say that a student is required to do an interview or upload a resume, if a student puts that slot on her wish list, it's going to prompt her to upload her resume before she can submit her wish list. If we turn this on, that's just going to allow her to submit her wish list without that resume or edit it after the fact. So if you want that option to be available for your students, you can go ahead and turn that on. Send notification after submit just means after your students submit the wish list, they will get an email notification letting them know that it's been submitted. And then any instructions you might have for your students, you could type here. So, if you just want to remind them something about the wish list, complete the, ranking of at least 3 spots, that they need to do it by the end date, any other instructions you might have for them, don't forget you need to complete at least one out of area rotation, whatever you might want to add there. And then you'll see here you also have the sequences. So if you did need to create separate wish list rounds for separate sequences, you absolutely could do that. Or if you want both available on the same wish list, you can't do that if you have multiple sequences. Otherwise, don't worry about it. You'll just have that one sequence checked off. Then we'll go ahead and save, and that will create my wish list round. And then after that, there's just one more thing that we need to check out here, and that is selecting my students. So you can click on the Select Students button if you want to change which students can see this wish list. So by default, it's going to select all of the students in this class. However, if I have a flex student who doesn't belong to this class who does need to see the wish list, I'll just need to go in and select her here. Also, maybe I have a student who I know I've already secured like a advanced placement slot for them. They're not going to need to participate in the wish list because they will be placed. We can just go in and find that student and uncheck them. I would also really encourage you to go through here and find your test student and go ahead and select that test student, make the wish list available to them. That way, if you log in as your test student, you will be able to see that wish list. So just go ahead and save if you've made any changes here. If not, you could always click on that X in the upper right. Then at this point, if you need to make any changes, you can go ahead and click on this pencil, or if you decide you don't want to use the wish list, you can of course go in and delete. But that's pretty much everything when it comes to the basic setup of a wish list.